Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Thanks for having me, Kate.
So what are the rights of illegal immigrants? How are those rights different from an American citizen when it comes to the court system?
Well, generally, everybody has the right in this country to due process and to go to court and to make their case and to be heard by the judge. And when the Congress wrote the law, they wrote it, thinking that the president would apply the law in good faith and to protect the country. But the problem right now is that we have a president who appears to be applying the law in a way that, separates families, and now he wants to gut due process. So there are nooks and crannies, provisions in that law, which could conceivably give the president the opportunity to take away the right to a judge, if you can imagine that, to take away.
That's very interesting, because that essentially the president's saying, you come here illegally, you get sent out. You should get sent out immediately.
Right.
And the first thing I thought is this within the president's powers?
Well, there are certain interpretations. I would argue no. I mean, the idea here is that the president is supposed to enforce the law in good faith, with an idea toward national security and border security. And locking up kids and then gutting due process, taking away the right to go to a hearing before a judge, does not serve border security, does not serve any of those interests. This is a country, Kate, where we were founded on fairness and freedom. Americans are all about fairness and freedom. The immigration law is harsh. It's true. And used in the wrong hands, as it is right now by the President of the United States, Donald Trump, it can be used as a battering ram. And I think we have to be mindful that this is an administration that's tried to ban an entire religion. This is an administration that has...
They say that's not what the policy ended up being in the 3.0 version of it. Continue, please.
Okay, well, it also is an administration that has threatened our local communities that want to enforce the law as they see fit for not enforcing immigration law. I have no doubt that this administration, Donald Trump, who's advised by a white nationalist, Stephen Miller in the White House, that the Secretary of Homeland Security...
I don't know if you want to go as far to I mean, let's not... I just did an entire segment about civility here. I don't know if you want to call Stephen Miller a white nationalist.
Well, it's not an uncivil thing. I would argue that it's a fact. But, okay, look... honestly, where I have not seen that, where is the fact on that? Well, look at what the types of policies that we've seen from this administration. Look who's being targeted by this administration. The point is that the law, Kate, should be used fairly. The point is that, Americans love due process. America is all about due process. And when we see a tweet from the president on a Sunday decrying judges, saying that there should be no judges, that people shouldn't have a chance. Immigration law is complicated, Kate, and if somebody comes into the United States, right, they may have been trafficked here. They may have the right to asylum, to stay here. They may be the victim in the United States if somebody's encountered who never entered legally and doesn't have papers. He or she may be the victim of domestic violence or trafficking or some other crime and may have the right to stay here, may have the right to a visa. That's why we have judges. That's why we have courts. And to say willy-nilly we're not going to use the courts or we shouldn't have courts, that's throwing out prejudging people who really need need due process. And if it starts with immigrants, how far does it go? This is an administration that has talked about denaturalizing American citizens.
It is Tuesday, the 26th of June of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder. That's right, folks. The secret is just a little dash of hot Hungarian paprika. Oh, my. Okay. Well, Chuck Schumer is out there doing, or did his best Neville Chamberlain impression. And as Neville Chamberlain said after he gave his announcement, now go back to bed. Okay. And they did. And the next thing you know, yeah, blitzkrieg, baby, blitzkrieg. This is not time for civility. I am sorry. I know what Chuck is getting at. He doesn't want to have to go to a restaurant and somebody kick him out because of his opinions. But trust me, Chuck's not going to go to those restaurants anyway, and those restaurants aren't going to kick out Chuck Schumer. He also doesn't want to have to be sitting at a table and someone coming up and expressing their views because he's a public figure. Every public figure hates that. But I got to tell you, it kind of comes with the territory. You would hope people wouldn't invade your privacy. But, on the other hand, I never gave Edward Teller a moment's peace whenever he came into the Pete's. Right there by the Claremont Resort, Berkeley-Oakland border in the Claremont District, right there. Used to come in the Pete's all the time, and I wasn't the only one, and I wasn't the first. So if we can give Edward Teller grief, then I think this administration might be due some. But do you notice how they respond? They come with guns. They threaten violence. All we do is, okay, we're going to comp your cheese plate, but really, it's just not good for you to be here, so we're asking you to leave, please. Please. Okay? There's a big difference. I don't know. Maybe she shouldn't have comped the cheese plate for Sarah. And then, coming with armed vigilantes might be justified, but she comped the cheese plate. Jeez. What is this country coming to? Well, I'm over this argument about we have to be civil. They do this every single time. 8 years, the most racist, vile BS said about the President of the United States. Supreme Court seats held open in violation of, well, I would say the Constitution. And the guy who furthered this lie about this racist trope of the President of the United States being born in Kenya, give me an effing break. And now he's running the show saying what is civil and uncivil. Have you ever looked at this guy's interior design? That's an affront to civility right there. Jeez. If only people would look at the big picture, huh? Speaking of the big picture, what are we going to attend to today? Well, listen, calling Stephen Miller a white nationalist is not impolite. It's just a fact. I just love how CNN, was that Brooke Baldwin? I can't remember. I think it was Brooke. Oh, well, you can't call Stephen Miller a white supremacist. We just had a whole thing about civility. Yeah, well, there's a difference between, calling someone names and stating a fact. And the fine professor, expressed that, I think, rather finely. Indeed. Well, on the rest of the menu here, in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, infamous white supremacist Mike Enoch Peinovich doesn't want you to know who his lawyer is because he's afraid he might be, I don't know, threatened in some way. But all the other lawyers have no problem saying, yeah, I'm here for the right wing and the fascists and the Nazis. If you need any help, I'm here. Except for Peinovich's lawyer. What's up with that? Oh, my former Congresswoman Barbara Lee always speaks for me, wherever and whatever district I might live. Out of state now, she still does. Well, she's calling for an investigation into Sarah Sanders' attack on the Red Hen restaurant, because you can't use your official position to go after private businesses. But have you looked at the condition of the ethics office these days, though? I don't think, well, at least Barbara's putting it through the process. And 4 incumbent Democrats join calls to abolish ICE. Of course, I said don't start it to begin with, but they're finally catching up. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Trump's tariffs force companies to rework supply chains that are better suited for an era of stable, open trade policy. You know, the good old days. And Saudi Arabia sent a misleading email to Congress after bombing a cholera treatment facility run by Doctors Without Borders. And this isn't the first, second, third, or fourth hospital that's been bombed by the Saudis that have been run by Doctors Without Borders. Yeah, well, those stupid doctors, they just want open borders, don't they? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll notice the chat room link monitored by our roaring girl, Kelly Lincoln. And so check in there to the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com are the chat contribute donate buttons. And they are positioned rather deftly by Superior Graphic Design. Thank you, Tom. And we are unable to do this without you, so thank you for your generosity. There's no joking about that. And as I stated, we are truly unable to do this without you, so keep it up. Thank you. And you can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that platform. You can go over to Facebook and check out there. I ostensibly take care of that, but as I've stated before, Facebook takes care of itself. And you can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Follow West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on Twitter at Cookbook West. Okay. And do check out the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes. I'm there as Justice Putnam. It is a multimedia experience here, so all those show notes and links and more. There's even more there for for your edification. Yes, do indeed check it out. All right, let me get over into the text part of what I've got. It's fun acting as producer and everything else all at the same time. Thank gosh we're able to multitask. Okay, this first article here is by Casey Michelle out of Think Progress. Now, this is an infamous white supremacist. I know more of this guy from out here on the West Coast because of his affiliation with Richard Spencer, who was also mentioned in this article. And actually his travails, Spencer's travails, and his inability to raise funds for, well, his cause. And I reported on that not terribly long ago, and that seems like a continuation of those travails that Spencer continues to, well, I like to say, enjoy. He may not find it very enjoyable. Most white supremacists don't. Okay, in the most substantial lawsuit facing white supremacists involved in last year's violent Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, numerous plaintiffs, dozens of defendants, and several attorneys on either side have made their names public. One, though, has tried to remain anonymous. The lawyer for Mike Peinovich, a white supremacist who likes to call himself Mike Enoch. You know, when I first saw it, I thought it said eunuch. Mike Eunuch. Yeah, I bet. I think that's really what's going on there. Poor guy. The lawsuit accuses Peinovich of conspiring with fellow defendants to commit a range of crimes, including assault and battery. For weeks, an anonymous lawyer has helped him file nearly as many motions to quash subpoenas, compel disclosures, and sanction the plaintiff's lawyers as the rest of the defendants combined. Thus far, all of the Peinovich motions have been denied. Now, that's some lawyering, ain't it? Maybe that's the reason he doesn't want anyone to know who he is, because he might be a shitty lawyer, as evidenced by his, lawyering. Now, attorneys for plaintiffs are attempting to unmask the white supremacist lawyer who has preferred to remain in the shadows. In a motion filed last Thursday, the plaintiffs' attorneys, led by Roberta Kaplan and Karen Dunn, requested the court's help in identifying the attorney helping Peinovich's case. Since the start of the case, Peinovich has claimed to be a pro se litigant. Now, these are the lawyers filing the motion, by the way. No attorney has entered an appearance on his behalf. Peinovich now admits that he has shadow counsel that ghostwrites his pleadings, but refuses to answer any interrogatory asking him to identify such counsel. I don't know. I wish that lawyers had a better flow with their narratives, but oh well. The motion notes that such anonymity is often considered unethical in other courtrooms, you would think, and smacks of gross unfairness that characterizes hit-and-run tactics, especially in terms of Peinovich's motions filed directly against the plaintiff's attorneys. Now, isn't that a great tactic that the right loves to use, especially Nazis, KKK, white supremacist types? You know those? Attack the actual persons and lawyers. Well, Peinovich's decision to keep his lawyer anonymous is the latest wrinkle in the lawsuit brought on behalf of Integrity First for America. The lawsuit is arguably the broadest legal action against the white supremacists behind last year's rally and includes the white supremacist killer of Heather Heyer among the numerous defendants. Now, Casey Michelle here, in true journalistic ethical fashion, and well she should, says alleged white supremacist killer. So I think that it's not necessarily alleged that the killer is a white supremacist and a killer. I think those have been well established. I think what she means is that, alleged to have killed Heather Heyer. But we're not held by such journalistic standards. The guy's going to be tried for killing Heather Heyer. Not allegedly, but we know. So, on with the article. Peinovich has denied prior requests for information on his lawyer, claiming, now this is what they always do this, they all become snowflakes, claiming apparent threats against the attorney. Peinovich argues that purported unspecified threats from Antifa justify the non-disclosure of his attorney's identity, the motion reads. However, he's offered no evidence of any threats and ignored the fact that other defendants' lawyers haven't been targeted. Tellingly, Peinovich cites no authority to support this argument, the motion reads. Yeah, you just put it out there. You don't need to have evidence. Evidence? What is this? Deep state tactics? You got to have evidence? It's unclear how the motion will proceed, but it's not the only new hurdle facing the white supremacists included in the lawsuit. In a familiar refrain, white supremacist Richard Spencer recently revealed that his latest fundraising venture has, yet again, collapsed, as we reported not very long ago. podcast offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, is an article by Tommy Christopher out of Share Blue Media. Well, Sarah Huckabee Sanders bullied a small business for standing up to her and used her government platform to do it. Now Representative Barbara Lee, Democrat of California, says Sanders should be investigated for the abuse. And yes, she should. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders tried to play the victim when a Virginia restaurant asked her to leave, but it could be Sanders who ends up being investigated for abusing her power to punish a private business. Sanders identified the Red Hen restaurant by name and location in a tweet to more than 3 million followers on her government Twitter account, writing that, I was told by the owner of Red Hen in Lexington, Virginia to leave because I work for Trump, and politely I left. Her actions say far more about her than about me. Yeah, she's actually an upstanding, morally convicted person, in spite of the fact she's running a business where money is king. I mean, money doesn't talk. Money swears, doesn't it? I'm a business owner. I'm loath to turn away business. I got to tell you, I've served some loathsome people. And I've not served some loathsome people, too. What happened in this situation is that normally what will occur is that if a server or whoever doesn't want to serve that person because of whatever, previous abuse, or they just, I can't serve Oral Roberts. I can't serve Oral Roberts. It would be a sin for me to serve Oral Roberts. Well, then another server will step in and just do it. And they couldn't find anybody else who would substitute. They just went down the line. No one on staff wanted to take care of Sarah Sanders and her party. And so they called the owner. And the owner wasn't even there. The owner had to come in. And and I don't know, the way that it's configured, it looks like maybe the owner lives upstairs, which is always a nice setup. It's very French. But so the owner politely asked Sarah Sanders to leave, comped the cheese platter that they had already consumed while the staff voted to say, no, none of us want to do this. And I don't know. It's not as if this has never happened before. And that's supposed to be a very uncivil or an uncivil act by the business owner. And she did it in spite of, like a loss of revenue, or I don't know. It's not really a loss of revenue. She's busy. But what's funny is that Red Hens all over America are getting death threats. So I want to know who's being uncivil here. Are you saying don't criticize us, or the wrath of hell will fall upon you, and then it will be your fault? Always blaming the victim. So then you got David Gergen out there talking about, oh yeah, everything was so much more civil during the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement. Yeah, 4 dead in Ohio at Kent State. That's very civil. When I was a little kid in 1965, we had a cross burned on our front lawn in the San Gabriel Valley of Southern California. Then later on, the next year, 66, my parents started the first San Gabriel, or the first ACLU chapter in the San Gabriel Valley. Boy, death threats and threats of bombings. We had bottles thrown at us from school, calling us, and lovers and all that stuff. I don't know. We love everybody, and people are throwing bottles at us. What's that all about? Because I sure didn't experience it from the other side where bottles were thrown back, for instance. Or we stalked KKK members or the neo-Nazis in Hacienda Heights and perpetrated vandalism upon their place. I mean, that never happened. So it was sort of civil. But also remember it being so civil, I got kicked out of Knott's Berry Farm when they wouldn't allow blacks in there. I had a black girlfriend. Got through the ticket booth. Security descended upon us, and I will say politely ushered us out, firmly, but very civil. Patty Baird of Think Progress penned this last offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It's time to abolish ICE. Representative Mark Pocan, Democrat of Wisconsin, said in a statement on Monday morning, becoming the fourth Democratic incumbent representative to call for the elimination of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency after a recent trip to the border. It was clear that ICE and its actions of hunting down and tearing apart families has wreaked havoc on far too many people, Pocan said in a statement. From conducting raids at garden centers and meatpacking plants to breaking up families at churches and schools, ICE is tearing apart families and ripping at the moral fabric of our nation. Pocan went on to say that President Trump... Oh, I'm sorry, we don't use the P word here. Let me rephrase that. Pocan went on to say that Trump and his team of white nationalists have so misused ICE that the agency can no longer accomplish its goals effectively, end quote. And the congressman plans to introduce legislation that would abolish the agency, he said. Pocan's call for the shutdown of ICE comes just hours after Representative Earl Blumenauer, Democrat of Oregon, published a post on Medium Sunday night in which he, too, suggests abolishing ICE and starting over, joining two of his House colleagues and a number of progressive Democrats running for office this year. Well, I would abolish the whole of the DHS, actually, and maybe turn its direction away from its Teutonic underpinnings. But I'm obviously a failed poet, philosopher, king, so I don't know. I'm in exile. Calls to abolish ICE have begun to roll in after weeks of uproar about the Trump administration's policy of separating families at the border. After formally implementing the policy last month, Trump signed an unnecessary executive order ending family separation in favor of indefinite family detention. You know, why kill families separately when you can kill them all together? Like in the good old days. You know, during my struggle. Yeah. Family separation is only the latest instance of ICE abuses. In January, the Outline's Gabby Del Val reported that asylum seekers are being sexually assaulted in U.S. detention. And an Intercept report from April found 1,224 complaints of sexual abuse in immigration detention centers. Half of the accused abusers worked for ICE. Now, I know we can cherry pick a lot, but boy, some of these ICE cases where, members of ICE who have perpetrated the sexual abuse has been horrendous. I don't know. I don't want to say that, just a few instances colors the whole agency. Well, they're given carte blanche to be Gestapo. Do you know that if this idea that, immigrants, asylum seekers don't have constitutional rights, they can just be deported at the border, no judges? Does that mean that what that means is that any ICE agent, any DHS agent can come up to you, accuse you of not being a U.S. citizen, and cart your ass offshore? Too bad. You can't prove it because you're an alien. See, that's what we're talking about here. And Trump's followers just love that. They want to see that. Blumenauer voted against the formation of the agency in 2002 under former President George W. Bush. And on Sunday, he called for immigration reform that prioritizes treating people with compassion and respect. No, we got to kick them in the teeth. It's a new day. See, if we want to treat asylum seekers with respect and compassion, that's called, you just want open borders. No, we want the rule of law. So, Senator Kamala Harris on Sunday, who is widely considered a likely presidential candidate in 2020, said she thinks there is no question that we've got to critically re-examine ICE and its role and the way it is being administrated and the work it is doing. And we need to probably think about starting from scratch. Well, I think that would be a good idea. Let's get to our break, and we'll come back and go through weather from around the world, and then finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Sarah Whitman. That's a female northern cardinal. And here's a female Venezuelan troupial. Many people assume that male songbirds are the ones doing the crooning, but more than 660 species of songbirds are known in which the females sing as well. And there are still 3,500 species of songbird in which the female singing status is unknown, which implies that there could be plenty more female singers to be found.
We often talk to people, both people who are scientists and ornithologists, but also people who are birders and citizen scientists who say, yeah, I have this story where a female was clearly singing.
Biologist Lauren Benedict of the University of Northern Colorado. These field reports inspired Benedict and Cornell behavioral ecologist Karen Odom to start the Female Birdsong Project with a group of colleagues in 2017. The goal is to get professional researchers and citizen scientists alike to submit recordings and field notes of birdsong from both males and females.
And we're hoping to really give them ways to report that and document it so that we can aggregate that information in useful ways.
On the project's website, femalebirdsong.org, you can hear various birds of both sexes and complex duets sung by pairs of songbirds like these black-bellied wrens. Now, Benedict and Odom are asking scientists to consider the existence of female birdsong in their research, even when it's not their primary focus. For example, from studying avian neurobiology to collecting population data for bird conservation. They wrote up their goals in the journal The Auk Ornithological Advances. Studying female birdsong is no simple task. Here's Karen Odom.
So the biggest thing is to see the bird, which is, number one, not trivial. And number two, in the past, since birdsong has been thought of as a male trait, it might not be that researchers were always verifying the sex of the bird by finding it and looking at it. But so we're asking people to please be aware that females sing and to actually try to get a look at the bird that you're recording.
These researchers hope that more awareness of female song will lead to better informed studies that can tell us when and why female birds are singing, and perhaps reveal aspects of avian life that no one has yet considered. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Sarah Whitman.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Several of the nation's leading historians have reflected on the reasons that the founders were unable to eliminate slavery. Bernard Bailyn, winner of the Pulitzer and Bancroft Prizes, contends that the idea of abolitionism did not exist in the era of the American Revolution. Bailyn writes, slavery was brutal and degrading. But as far as the colonists knew, slavery in one form or another had always existed. And if it was brutal and degrading, so too was much else of ordinary life at the lower levels of society. Only gradually did people come to see that slavery was a peculiarly degrading and uniquely brutalizing institution. Bailyn contends that to condemn the founders for having tolerated and perpetuated a society that rested on slavery is to expect them to have been able to transcend altogether the limitations of their own age. He points out that what is significant in the historical context of the time is not that the liberty-loving revolutionaries allowed slavery to survive, but that they, even those who profited directly from the institution, went so far in condemning it, confining it, and setting in motion the forces that would ultimately destroy it. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on June 25th, 2018. I'm C. Murray Ainsborough. For the first time, a global union has elected exclusively women to its top management positions. Uni Global Union has elected Christy Hoffman as its General Secretary and Elke Bosinger as its Deputy General Secretary. Uni is the global union for skills and services. It represents some 20 million workers who are employed in sectors such as finance, IT, media, hair and beauty, tourism, sports, and garment production. Naturally, given the historic decision, both newly elected leaders addressed the struggles of working women in their addresses to the delegates. Here is UNI's new General Secretary, Christy Hoffman.
It's our time to make big leaps forward for all working women. Because sexual harassment is pervasive, there are many surveys out there, but most of them show that about half of working women report they've been victim of sexual harassment. That's in every country where there's been a service taken, half. And low-wage service jobs are the worst of all. So that's us, everybody. So what can we do? One thing we can do, of course, is to try to make sexual harassment illegal in our countries. Many countries have done so, but not all, and most of the laws don't really help us as much as we would like. Also, we are trade unionists. I believe in the union solution, and for all of us involved in collective bargaining, this is the time to put our most ambitious demands on the table. We should get a process with every employer. The process should protect people who come forward, and it should give some meaningful punishments for those who are the wrongdoers, but also it should be fair for everybody. This is the time, an unrivaled opportunity for us to get these provisions which can go beyond whatever our laws provide. We can also negotiate sexual harassment protections in every global framework agreement. And then, for those women without a union, and let's face it, that is the vast majority, this should only strengthen our resolve to bring these women into a union, to let them know that protection from sexual harassment is another reason to come together and organize. Sisters, can we make this happen? Yes, we can!
Elected as Deputy General Secretary at UNI's World Congress in Liverpool was Elke Bosinger.
Without women in the workplace, everywhere in the world, all of our economies will not grow to the extent that they need and could. And of course, men and women must be paid equal wages. Is that too much to ask? We need laws that help to move women through the glass ceiling. And those of us who've made it, we must help others by sharing our experience, by putting out a helping hand, by coaching or mentoring other women. But the role of men and boys is also critical in this. It's not just women who should be fighting for equality, but men too, as gender stereotyping hurts them just as much as it hurts women. In a male-dominated world, the empowerment of women must be a key priority. And we, the women, already have what it takes to succeed. A wise mother once said to her daughter, "If you aim to be as good as a man, you're not very ambitious." Friends, empowerment is about breaking structural barriers. Men still dominate, even in countries that consider themselves progressive. We all become better off when we open doors of opportunity for women. Women's rights are human rights, and attacks on women are attacks on all of us. Violence against women and girls is perhaps the most obvious manifestation of the deep imbalances of power in our societies. We must act together and for the nearly 1 billion women who will enter the global economy in the next decade. With Christy and myself, UNI will have an all-women team leading this great organization. And it's our ambition to make UNI an organization where gender equality is embedded in everything we do. Organizing women into unions and helping them fulfill their goal is a key priority for us.
The delegates at the UNI Congress, which was conducted from June 17th to 20th, also elected a new president. Ruben Cortina from Argentina is the former president of UNI Americas. I'm Sue Marie Angstro. Thank you for listening.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. Turkish President Recep Erdogan was re-elected on Sunday, setting him up to rule Turkey until 2023 and with greater powers than ever before. Constitutional reforms ushered in last year have now removed the post of prime minister and given Erdogan greater powers to create or abolish government agencies and sack civil servants without oversight. International observers from the European Union and the OSCE described Sunday's elections as presenting a genuine choice between 6 candidates, but that was about the only thing they complimented. In a joint statement on Monday, those observers condemned a visible police presence within polling sites, severe restrictions on the press, and the imprisonment of a popular opposition candidate. Those factors, they said, conspired to give Erdogan and his ruling AK party a major leg up in the vote. And women in Saudi Arabia are now legally allowed to drive, thanks to an easing of strict religious rules instituted by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. But as the Saudi government launches a PR campaign to brand itself as a modernizing kingdom, prominent female activists who long campaigned to have the right to drive languish in jail. Among them is Lujain al-Hathlul, who was imprisoned last month and branded by state media as a traitor. Al-Hathlul gained notoriety after her arrest while trying to drive from the United Arab Emirates to Saudi Arabia in 2014. She, alongside 2 other prominent activists, Iman al-Nafjan and Aziza al-Youssef, have called on the Saudi government to also scrap discriminatory male guardianship laws, in which men, either fathers, husbands, or brothers, make key decisions on behalf of women. The continued imprisonment of prominent Saudi female activists at this historic moment is a sign that as the country frees up the roads, Saudi Arabia won't be democratizing anytime soon. Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us to the chef's table here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. And we always like to begin with weather from around the world. And we begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 51 degrees. And we're going to be a tad warmer today. We're going to be bumping 90. And if we're bumping 90, that means we're going to be bumping over 90. Winds right now are out of the south-southwest at about 1 mile per hour, and we'll be shifting out of the northwest in a couple of hours, and then we'll be at their usual 5 to 10 miles per hour, and we'll continue that way through the evening and until tomorrow. So thank you. At least it'll be somewhat of a scouring wind. Scour it. Yes, so not much of a chance of rain for today, but because of this warmer weather and it can meet some cold air, increasing possibility of thunderstorms tonight, which could bring rain. So we never know. Small, slight. But dry conditions will continue, of course, because that's how it is this time of year. And grass pollen remains very high. I've got a reading on the air quality index. It is at 11 parts per million, which is good. And of course, the UV daytime index remains very high at 9. High pressure dominates at 30.04 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And as I mentioned earlier, dry conditions will continue because relative humidity is at 77%. All right. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Well, the guy outside of London is registering 80 degrees, and it is sunny. Oh, nice. Paris is 81 and sunny. Very nice. Rome is 82 and partly cloudy. They do have a thunderstorm and electrical storm watch and advisory that could knock out critical infrastructure. And that's how that happens in Rome. Kiev is 77 and fair. Kabul is 79 degrees and fair. Hong Kong is 80 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 73 and mostly cloudy, and they also have electrical storm watch that could knock out infrastructure. Sydney, Australia is 54 degrees with rain. San Francisco, California is 53 degrees and partly cloudy with a small craft advisory for winds on the bay and offshore. And New York, New York is a lovely 73 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. Oh, sunny as hell. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. First offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, is out of Reuters by reporting by Rajesh Kumar Singh with editing done by Joe White and Matthew Lewis. And Mr. Singh reports out of Chicago. From global manufacturers such as Harley-Davidson Inc. to small tech startups, companies are scrambling to rework supply chains built for an era of stable open trade policy that is now under threat. As Donald Trump pushes to upend the status quo of global trade, companies that initially took a wait-and-see stance are starting to take action to shield their businesses from shifting trade policy. On Monday, that was yesterday, U.S. motorcycle maker Harley-Davidson warned of higher costs because of retaliatory EU tariffs. I guess they're going to want to sell more leaky oil pan Harleys over in Europe now. Okay. And said it would ship production of bikes destined for the European Union out of the U.S. to factories it has built in India, Brazil, and Thailand. The decision of the Milwaukee, Wisconsin-based company, which Trump vowed to make great again when he took office, came less than a week after Mercedes-Benz maker Daimler AG cut its 2018 profit forecast, citing growing trade tensions. Its German rival, BMW, said it was considering possible strategic options in view of the rising trade tensions between China and the U.S. Harley is the latest example of how companies are finding themselves in the crosshairs following tit-for-tat retaliations over Trump's bid to rewrite global trade rules as part of his America First agenda. I actually think this is an America Last agenda, because aren't we the last piece in this decades-long gambit? Yes, I'm going to say it, by Putin and his cronies to destabilize every democratic government in the world, and we're the last piece in that effort. I'm just saying. Office furniture maker Steelcase last week reported a 230 basis point fall in the gross margins of its American business in the first quarter due to higher raw materials costs following Trump's metal import tariffs. See, trade wars always hurt us. And do you think that was by accident? Ineptness? Or do you think someone had a design in all of this? A manufacturer can no longer assume that the direction of trade policy is towards freer and freer trade over time. Dustin Burke, a partner at the Boston Consulting Group, told Reuters last month. Analysts at Morgan Stanley estimate that the U.S. tariffs, along with the retaliatory duties imposed or under consideration by trade partners, will affect 1% of global trade. But for some companies, that 1% covers a much larger share of their supply chain. It's not clear how Washington's trade dispute with China and other partners will be resolved, and that has many companies still reluctant to take action that could take years to pay off. If you tell us what the rules are, we'll determine the best way to position the capacity and to go about the investment, said Michael Lamach, chief executive of heating and air conditioning product maker Ingersoll Rand plc. What you need is certainty around the rules. Yeah, but this is like deconstructing the administrative state, Mr. Businessman. Stability? That doesn't work. Instability is what needs to be achieved. Jesus. Okay, a lot of our clients are asking, how do we turn our supply chains from a necessary evil into a competitive weapon? Well, companies routinely examine supply chains to make them more competitive. But until now, very few mapped vulnerability to trade risk beyond their primary suppliers. Well, that's very nice, isn't it? Well, a small startup, HyperSense, that sells internet-connected home climate control systems, decided early this month to end its reliance on imports of thermostats from China and fast-track a plan to manufacture devices in Pennsylvania. They don't want to be subjected to the ebbs and flows of the political environment. That's Chief Revenue Officer Bob Field said in an interview. We would much rather be in control of what we're doing. So it's going to take them a minimum of 9 months and at least $200,000 in research funds and development before the 2-year-old startup can even begin production. Until then, says the company has no option but to pay an additional 25% tariff on the shipments of thermostats from China and hope that its customers would accept the increased costs.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
All right, last offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, is by Ryan Goodman out of Just Security. On a recent Wednesday night in June, Saudi Arabia's embassy emailed members of the U.S. Congress providing them something between a false and misleading account of an airstrike that took place in Yemen. 2 days earlier, the military coalition led by Saudi Arabia and armed by the United States had reportedly blown up a cholera treatment facility belonging to the international humanitarian organization Médecins Sans Frontières, the Doctors Without Borders. In its email, the kingdom could not even bring itself to acknowledge that the coalition carried out the direct attack on the Doctors Without Borders facility. Instead, the Saudis used the passive voice, writing that their message concerned a, quote, cholera treatment facility hit in Yemen, end quote, without saying who hit it. The Kingdom's email highlighted a piece of information that let the coalition off the hook. The email stated, Médecins Sans Frontières acknowledged an error they made in not officially informing the coalition of the new treatment facility's location. And the embassy attached a letter that Doctors Without Borders employee had sent hours after the bombing took place. But by that Wednesday evening, the Saudis knew or should have known that relying on the low-level employee's letter would be misleading. Now, this is not the first time for the Saudi-led coalition to bomb a Doctors Without Borders medical facility in Yemen or to paper over such a dreadful event with falsehoods. With this letter to Congress, however, Saudi public communication efforts reached a new low. The Saudis must have been especially worried this time around. In the hours following the bombing of the Doctors Without Borders facility that Monday on June 11th, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis acknowledged that the U.S. military advises the coalition of no fire areas where there are civilians, where there's mosques, hospitals. When asked specifically about the cholera hospital, Mattis said emphatically, we have to find out what happened there. Mattis told the gaggle of reporters that he just got off the phone with General Joseph Votel, the head of the U.S. coalition or U.S. Central Command, and that Votel's staff was scrambling to determine what the coalition had done. It was another admission on Mattis's part that at least this time, the U.S. would independently assess the coalition's actions, a responsibility which the Pentagon has not always acknowledged. But the Saudis were right about one thing. The low-level MSF employee had stated in his letter, I would like to explain that there has been an error from our side as we failed to inform you officially of the location of the new site. But the Saudis made a serious mistake in using the letter. The employee was wrong about his facts, and the Saudi government knew or should have known that. In reality, MSF had notified the Saudi coalition 12 times of the coordinates of the cholera treatment center. 12. For its part, the coalition acknowledged these. Now that's 12, yeah. For its part, the coalition had acknowledged these coordinates at least 9 times in writing, and the kingdom omitted that information in its email to Congress. Well, because they want more money. All right. So these facts exposed another hole in the Saudis' attempt at justification. Imagine if MSF had not provided its coordinates. Would a failure to give the coalition that kind of information mean locations like hospitals, schools, and mosques could then be attacked with abandon? Of course not. And so says the laws of war. The responsibility to avoid bombing protected sites and killing civilians rests with the attacker. And some civilians may well fear that giving the coalition their coordinates will invite an attack, rather than cause the coalition to keep them safely on a no-strike list. Yeah, well, I think what that's known in military jargon is a FUBAR. And the Saudis need to be reined in. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but Roots Radio broadcasts on with breaking news as it happens. Of course, we will meet up with you tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, because that's what we do. We do that, yes. So stay tuned to breaking news on Netroots Radio throughout the day as it happens, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme aux langues de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.